at Upwardly Global. Following the panel discussion, we will be hearing from Anastasia Sokolova, Upwardly Global's alumna from Ukraine, who has found skilled aligned work in the US. Anastasia will be interviewed by Kristina Dawkins, Upwardly Global's Director of Women's Economic Power Program. These women are a force to be reckoned with, and I look forward to the next hour. Thank you all for joining, and I'll pass it over, Jina, to you.
Thank you, Tammy, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. So, as many of you know, Upwardly Global, we are the first national organization that's working for immigrant and refugee professionals and helping them get skill-aligned work in the United States. Doing this work supports immigrants and refugees, but it also supports their families, their communities, and it helps build dignity, which is at the heart of successful inclusion and helps our economy. Our goal today is to spread the know-how we have gained over the past 20 plus years to build this field and reach the more than 2.3 million immigrant and refugee professionals who need our support. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Christina, who is a leader in moving skills-based hiring, which represents a tremendous transformation in how our country understands and shares opportunity. Jobs for the Future, JFF, is a leader in policy and narrative change and a critical pillar of systemic change, which are all pieces of the puzzle that we believe we need in order to ensure that all of our communities succeed. I'm also thrilled to welcome Heather Reilly, who is a leader at Deloitte. But in addition, she is a powerful voice for refugees and refugee hiring. She's not only led research on this issue, but she's also worked in Deloitte to advance refugee hiring. So in order to create systemic change, which is one of the conversations we want to start at UpGo, we know that we need employers, we need policymakers, and we need communities to collaborate and align around this mission. That's why this panel is so powerful, and we're thrilled to be having this conversation. So I want to start my first question with Kristina, which is, for those of us in the audience, what is skills-based hiring? What do we see working at companies that are doing this work? And what needs to happen for skills-based hiring to continue to advance?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. Happy Women's Month to everyone. So for us, skills-based hiring, it's an approach to recruit that really focuses on identifying the specific skills and abilities that are necessary for a particular job or occupation. So this is evaluating candidates based on their demonstrated ability to perform those skills, whether it's being a mechanic or a nurse or other areas. And rather than relying on just the traditional qualifications, such as a degree, we want to include, alumni networks. We want to include other things that support the skills that someone actually has. We look at skills-based hiring. Job descriptions typically outline specific skills for that and competencies for that role. And candidates are evaluated through assessments or work samples or other performance-based measures. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago, I had the opportunity to visit, I think it's called Tech Hire in Boston. And they actually had hackathons where they invited people who were interested in coding and solving problems and watched them, how they worked in teams, how they solved problems, how they asked questions, and actually hired them based on that. I always thought that was an amazing approach, but for me, that solidifies what skills-based hiring is. It's the abilities that people can demonstrate. I think this approach also helps to ensure that candidates are truly evaluated based on what they can do, not based on, again, their traditional degree. So for us, we are seeing skills-based hiring work across the industry. You mentioned it. It does take, I think, a public-private partnership sometimes to make these work in certain areas. We're seeing a lot of traditional credentials that don't really need the degree. We're seeing technology, creative fields, skilled trades. Right now, people can learn skills in so many ways. Immersive technology is available. Again, peer-to-peer learning, work-based learning programs. And so we see a lot of organizations and companies bringing those in-house. Companies are resetting degree requirements, and we see organizations leveraging organizations like Correlation One or Perscolis or Upwardly Global or Year Up, and hiring employees that they may have overlooked in the past. I was just reading, I think the other day, 110, which started just in 2020, and their goal has really been committed to a skills first hiring for 1 million Black individuals over the next 10 years. And they've been able to get 70 companies signed on, partnering with talent development organizations. And they've seen since 2020, 65,000 people being hired into fulfilling careers. I think, Jina, you mentioned dignity and kind of bringing that back into the fold for individuals. And also, I think within that group, there were nearly 19,000 or 20,000 that were promoted into positions. And so it's not just about getting into the role, it's oftentimes about upskilling. So I think, we need to make skills-based hiring really the norm or the status quo as we go forward, the public-private partnerships, using technologies where we can to really help train individuals. And sometimes it's not just on the hard skills, it can be on the softer skills or the management skills. We saw over the pandemic, a lot of people being put into management positions where they had to have different conversations with their employees. And some people had never managed employees in the past. We saw some companies leveraging technologies such as immersion, which actually allows individuals to simulate hard conversations and get that practice before they actually have to do it. And so I'm really impressed with what corporations are starting to do, the creative paths that they're taking, going against the norm, and I say it that way because that's truly what it is. It's moving past the status quo before. So yeah, that's what we're seeing. I can go into more detail as well.
It might be useful. Could you give us an example? I mean, you mentioned public-private partnerships as a successful method in order to move skills-based hiring. Do you have an example of where you feel like that's worked well?
Yeah, so the one that I gave around 110, I think that has worked well. That includes a coalition of corporations that are hiring. It includes talent providers that are training employees. It includes university and colleges that also have programs. And so utilizing and leveraging all that is out there to provide that support. And I think the other part, we look a lot at the social network and social capital, right? And so sometimes it's not just about the skills, but enabling people with those who have gone through the same path before or have connections to jobs and are able to meet and get to know someone personally and open those doors for them. And so I think it's really looking at all the different types of players and stakeholders that need to be at the table to make this work and play their role really well and prevent those gaps where people get maybe lost when they get a credential. What happens next? You need to actually close those gaps, tighten the seams so that people don't fall through the cracks.
A couple of things that you mentioned that resonate with me specifically when I think of our immigrant and refugee community is the difference between skills and title. Oftentimes when, you mentioned before career navigation, like for our community, they often don't know how their skills fit into the US labor market. And they don't know what titles they should be applying for in job applications or against job descriptions. And so how do we understand that skills-based hiring can also benefit these immigrant communities that are coming here and understanding how those skills are really transferable, whereas titles are not always transferable. And then the second piece was the social capital. I mean, obviously a lot of immigrants who come to the United States, the social capital they inherit is really whatever community they end up living in. And oftentimes that remains in, the same immigrant group. And so they have limited social capital, especially when it comes to accessing professional work. So those two things really resonate for me. But as you're sitting from your seat, how do you see immigrant and refugee professionals being a part of this skills-based hiring effort?
It's essential. It's critical, right? You look at 33 million Americans have some college, but not a degree. 27 million underemployed workers. Many of those are immigrants and refugees. When we look at developing new talent pipelines, we're also seeing there's 1 in 6 Americans that are from another country. And we, JFF did some research around immigrant and refugee workers contributing nearly $2 trillion to our national GDP. And you look at that, but then you also look at that there's 70% of all immigrants in the labor force are in these essential worker occupations and skills. And many of those are paid lower than we would want folks to be paid. Some of them are also in dangerous jobs, whether they're working on farms or other hospitals, clinics. We saw this during the pandemic. And so when we think about the growth over the next 4 decades, there's projected to be 18 million immigrants in our workforce. And listen, you all know it best, right? Just in terms of folks that are researching and needing to push past the roadblocks that they have. You just did a research on youth immigrants, and we talked about that a while ago around that career navigation and really helping people to find, finance, and flourish, as we like to say, in this economy. And so I think there's the opportunity, there's definitely the strong talent pool. You talked about transferable skills. How do we translate that for individuals? One, in terms of what may fit them for their strength or their talent or what makes them happy. The other for where there are the gaps in the system or gaps in the labor market, where there are open jobs and where they might start today, but see a career progression over time and work towards that. Where they can live in communities and build their families and have all the resources that they need. So we see that there's just amazing opportunities. We look at work that I think it's Amazon and some other folks have done just in terms of providing kind of personalized career guidance to individuals that are needing more support and understanding, again, what is available in terms of jobs, but also providing personalized language learning so that they can increase their English, because we know with increased English, there are more opportunities that come. And so I think there's huge need for the talent pool that we have.
I appreciate that. And I think one statistic that I would add that people often don't know is that today, 83% of growth in our working age population comes from immigrants and the children of immigrants. So they are already a huge contributor to our future workforce. Heather, Kristina mentioned something about, companies that are going against the norm in order to shift from traditional hiring to skills-based hiring. You said in Deloitte, and so what do you think companies need to do to shift towards more skills-based hiring?
Yeah, I love this question. It really comes down to, how do we break the status quo? I mean, coming from a professional services firm, we were always used to hiring from the best schools, master's degrees, MBAs, and really ask the question to ourselves as diversity, equity, inclusion, and purpose became really high parts on our agenda. And you'll see that across many boardrooms and many companies. What else can we be doing? And, in the news, obviously, with everything that's happened over the past couple of years between Afghanistan, Ukraine, et cetera, refugees is a topic. And so, one, we were having I would say, shortage in hiring and specific skill sets. Two, we needed more diverse individuals in our business because it contributes to the bottom line. It's fact that the more diverse leaders, the more diverse individuals you have in an organization, it does have a great business outcome. And our people within our firm really want to have purpose. We want to do good in the world. And so all of those things are in great alignment to really ask ourselves, what could and should we be doing differently? And so a couple of examples that we did at Deloitte is one, as Christina mentioned, we challenged ourselves on, do people really need 4-year degrees? And do you really need the certifications that traditionally we expect? And for us, that was hard because in our contracts with our clients, there is, education expectations, and having those hard conversations on the why. You're not getting a lesser quality person. However, they may not have the certifications that you're used to, and getting clients in agreement and alignment with that. One of the creative things that we did is that we partnered with Salesforce and asked them to train up some of the refugees, because that was a skill set we saw in the market that we needed for our clients. We needed more people that could get certified in Salesforce, and they leaned in with us, and we created a training program. And so finding more opportunities to partner and get certifications for people that make them more market relevant and meet a need is really important. Another thing that we did is we created a refugee community of interest within the firm. There are so many refugees, first or second generation, that already existed and are really passionate about this topic, and leaned in on that community to help us figure out what else could and should we be doing. Once you hire people into the organization, the cultural piece really matters. It's great to make a commitment. You'll see a bunch of organizations have recently made commitments to hiring, and yet you can hire and then people fail 6 months later. And so how do you create a culture? How do you train them up? How do you make sure that they learn the cultural norms that might not have existed from where they came from? And so those are some of the things that we did. And the last thing I'll highlight, leaning in with your local, like Lutheran Social Services, which is a Virginia-based nonprofit, helped us on this journey. We spent a lot of time with them. Our teams wanted to figure out what needs existed within the community. And we did this with a lot of refugee organizations across different parts of the US. But for this one in particular, trying to figure out how do we create individualized plans, Christina mentioned this, for the newly arrived people that are joining the workforce, and having people that have grown up in the professional services environment, partnering with nonprofits and working closely with the people in that nonprofit who are job seeking has really given us insight not only into how do we adjust our hiring because we're learning based on the hard experiences they're having, but we're also helping them get into other companies through our network, resume building, skill building. So those are a couple of things that we're leaning in on. It does take some passionate people in the company to lean in and help reimagine and think differently. But the positive thing is, I feel like a lot of our competitors and partners are really leaning in on this journey in a great way.
And I really like what you say about community, because I was just having a conversation with somebody at the Salesforce Foundation about, now that we see a lot of tech companies firing people, are we worried about what that means for, hiring of these underrepresented, under-tapped talent pools? And I said, the success that Upwardly Global has had in companies is really when we have champions in these companies. It's not like we go to a company and we say, look, we have an untapped talent pool, you have labor market needs, why don't we connect? It's really because we have people in those companies that deeply care, are very passionate, open up opportunity, keep this on the radar, and become sort of the enabling environment that organizations like us or other refugee serving organizations need in order to then make the headway into saying, this is talent that you should be tapping into, and this is what success might look like. And you already have an environment in those companies that are people in those companies that are deeply committed to ensuring that success is there. So that really, really resonates with me. I also need to make a plug that Upwardly Global is working with Deloitte on the Salesforce training to help Afghans in Texas. So thank you for that. And about this cultural norms piece. And all of this is a really timely conversation, Heather, because the White House has just set up the Task Force for New Americans and is looking into these issues about how do we ensure that we're helping include into workforce training and education immigrants and refugees. What do you think the role of government is in advancing sort of this more skills-based hiring, this refugee hiring efforts?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about this. The government is my biggest client, and personally. And so I've spent a lot of time on this journey. I'll talk about a couple of things. I would say first thing out front is the policy making. There's a lot of requirements that exist right now that don't allow refugees to get easily hired. So I'll use Afghanistan as an example. We spent a lot of time training people in Afghanistan to fly our helicopters, our planes. When we closed down Afghanistan and brought a lot of them here, they're not allowed to be pilots in the United States. And, because of certain pilot license requirements. So the irony is we trained them, we trusted them on our warfighting machines in Afghanistan, and they come here and they can't fly a plane. And so, how do we think about the policies that are unintentionally having a negative impact on communities that the US has already stood up and said, we want to support, we believe in this community, they've done good things for us, we want to help them, that inadvertently are making an impact. So policy making and policy reimagination is key. I would say at the state level, we did our Deloitte Center for Government Insights, worked closely with our refugee community of interest that I mentioned earlier. And we did a study working closely with a lot of state refugee coordinators. And at the state level, Utah actually stood out as someone that's doing something really cool. And I think a lot of other states can learn from it. But the state of Utah transformed its resettlement process and created the Utah Refugee Services Office, which gave direct access to the state's Department of Workforce Services resources. And what's unique about it, it's the only state that mandates 2 full years of case management support. And so it really takes a look at English fluency and life skills and what the outcomes are, and tracks and supports, and I would say in a much longer way than a lot of the other states are doing. And that support makes a huge difference in the long run. So that long-term case management tracking and direct coordination with the work services program, we saw as a really great best practice that other states could use. At the federal level, I already talked about policy making. A ton of it, the role of the resettlement agencies is critical, and making sure that that funding for organizations that are resettlement agencies, for Upwardly Global, of course, I mean, the people that are supporting these communities in a real way, funding's hard. And so how do we make sure that those resources keep flowing in the right ways, so that the government itself doesn't necessarily have to be responsible for the skill building, but use the organizations that do this and have a passion about it and a mission to do it. And I think also just providing better information to the refugee resettlement agencies, so they're not starting from scratch. So Jina, you and I have talked about this. When a refugee arrives, the State Department's already has a ton of information, and we're not passing that information on in terms of what's the education, the employment background, anything that might be relevant to help them be successful in the United States. The data exists, but it's not flowing down to the people that are actually helping them. And that creates a little bit of a, inefficiency that I think could be an easy fix.
Amazing. I want to shift the conversation, because we only have a couple of more minutes left, to what does this mean for women? So, Christina, when we think about women in the workforce, is there a connection that you see between occupational segregation and skills-based hiring?
Absolutely. And before I answer that, I just want to underscore a couple of things just on that data piece. We absolutely need to make sure our systems are interoperable. Data exists. It needs to be aggregated so that we can make those connections as we go. So I just want to plug that. So when we define occupational segregation, it's really when a demographic group, so a woman, immigrant, Black, is either overrepresented in one area or underrepresented. And we've absolutely seen this just in terms of wage disparities. We've seen low wages limit people from mobility, from financial stability, from wealth building opportunities, from, wellness and dignity. As again, you mentioned, I always love that word, because I think it's really underlying to people's advancement and fulfillment in this work and world. We look at occupational segregation limiting someone's choice and mobility in the work that they're doing, particularly aligning skills where they're best utilized. A lot of people are making choices that don't necessarily fit with what they're good at or what they can do. And the Center for American Progress actually has a lot of fascinating charts. I'm a data person, so I love to kind of slice the data by race, by gender, by location. And it's interesting, you'll see that, for example, Black women constitute 6% of the employed workers, but make up 32% of health home aides, 32%, where they're earning $23,000 a year. We'll see that Asian American, Pacific Islander women are all levels of education, constitute 3% of total employment, and are most overrepresented as manicurists. And they're making $21,000 a year. So you look at that occupational segregation, many factors behind that, of course. But I think one thing we must do is create the right conditions to, one, attract women into different high wage opportunities, those who want it, I'll say, and then create conditions and opportunities to retain women. So it's not just about getting in the door, it's about sustaining that employment. Again, we've seen just in the last couple of years, women having and making the choice to step away from roles. The balance that they needed was not there. The incentives were not there. The compensation was not there. We've seen a lot of corporations starting to look at worker benefits to support, we call it wraparound supports, those childcare subsidies that are coming, transportation. I was actually just talking to a startup at South by Southwest around a company called Better Leave. We've got a lot of individuals in the workforce right now that are kind of that sandwich workforce. They're working with their kids and homeschooling or parenting and being around for their children, as well as aging parents. And so how do you handle and manage that? And so this Better Leave company is actually supporting all facets of bereavement and family planning. And I thought that was a great worker solution, worker benefit to add. And so, we encourage corporations to really think about those wraparound supports that are needed, not only to attract, but again, to retain and support women as they move, so that as they are moving into these high wage, high pressure jobs, sometimes they're also getting the support they need to stay.
I really appreciate that, because it also echoes something Heather, you said, which is, skills-based hiring is critical in order how we rethink how we're creating entry points for people to access opportunity. And we also need to make sure that we're retaining them, to your point, Christina, and setting them up for success to integrate or to be successfully included into our corporate environments so that they're succeeding. So I guess, Heather, the question I have for you is you talk about how do we set people up for success within company culture? So what do you think that means in particular for women as new immigrant hires?
Yeah, this is a great question. We fully believe that mentoring is the number one way to get women standing on steady ground and on a great path once they get in the door. And so we've created a program where we partner senior people that have grown up in the firm with new hires internally to help them understand. And the culture, I cannot emphasize enough the cultural differences. Like in our firm, network and promoting yourself is a really important thing for people to staff you on projects and to give you opportunities. And a lot of these individuals come from communities that promoting yourself is not a thing. Like it's not seen as a positive thing. And so how do you allow the mentors to use their networks to support others, make sure you understand what their career plan is, and give them the right training so they're wildly successful. In addition to that, we've committed to mentoring 2,000 Afghan women and girls over a 5-year period that aren't all necessarily with the firm, but really trying to help them develop professionally with the goal of achieving economic resilience. Like at the end of the day, we want to make sure every single woman that comes into this country has the opportunities. And, Christina brought up a great point, like the unevenness of where these women are landing is truly based on their communities and the network. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You come in, you meet people, those people give you access to jobs, and the jobs are pretty much in the same spaces. And so how do we figure out how to break this cycle? By training them up in new ways and identifying where they are. And so our partnership with our nonprofit organizations that help us keep a pulse on here's communities that we think would be great to upskill and could be good for your market has been also really helpful for us as well.
Yes, we helped place an Afghan colleague into Accenture, and he said, I thought the interview was done when I got this job, but I didn't realize I have to interview for every single project.
Every project.
So that absolutely resonates, especially with our community. And I also think for people who don't know what it's like to work in a professional services organization as well, which is project-based. I thank you so much for this. I want to take an opportunity to open up questions to anybody on the call. I'm sorry, I should have plugged in that if you have questions, please enter them into the chat. Otherwise, I don't know if we have a hand raising function for people to be able to raise their hand and ask questions. Yes, we do. A head nod that we do. So would anybody like to ask a question of these incredible women?
I'm happy to get the questions started. We are very fortunate to have such an esteemed panel of leadership from Upload as well as our partners. So so happy to hear from all of you. My question is actually to every one of you. What is an area you see as the greatest opportunity to move change in the next couple of years? And I think naturally, maybe Heather can talk about corporate change, Christina can talk about policy change, and Jina can talk about change in training and support of job seekers, immigrant and refugee job seekers.
So I'm happy to start with the corporate change question. I think we have to do a much better job of celebrating the outcomes. There's lots of goodness when you hire and you reimagine the workforce and you bring these communities into a culture that may have historically not thought of hiring from this community. And I don't think we are amplifying the message in the boardrooms enough. I don't think we're amplifying the message enough with, across the industries. And so, from a corporation perspective, identifying the benefits, celebrating them, using people like Upwardly Global to get that out there. I really think we're underserving ourselves because, a lot of good moments and movement has happened. And yet we're not talking about the positive outcomes in a way that I think it's catching on as quickly as it could or should. And how we get that out there and celebrate needs to happen a lot more.
Yeah, I double down on that. I think, showing who the exemplars in this space and showing that it can be done. I think, Heather, you mentioned earlier, you need passionate people. Jina, you mentioned needing advocacy and champions, and we need to amplify those that are doing well. I think the other thing is for us, it's really looking at what is a quality job and making sure that all employers are looking at the components of what makes a quality job. Yes, compensation and wage is one area. Heather, you mentioned kind of the culture and let's double down on that. People need a psychologically safe space, one that is culturally sensitive and supportive of all people. And so making sure that there's an inclusive culture. Also the structure of jobs, making sure that there's equitable policies and practices across the board, making sure that people are getting fair and consistent, transparent scheduling if they're a frontline worker. We look at career advancement. So we talked about the 1 million credentials. If people are going to advance, making sure they understand what that means, that there are defined career ladders and pathways and the mentorship and sponsorship that go along with that. And you talked about, Jina, earlier, salary and title or titles and then skills. They're not always commensurate or the same. And so making sure people really understand what those title bands mean for them and giving them the opportunity for professional development and training that can lead them to that next level, whether that's through a credential, through some other means of training or time and grade or work-based experience. And so quality job is an area that I absolutely believe we can get better in across the board.
And I agree with all of that. And I guess my contribution would be, we need a mentality shift around what contributions and skills are and what they mean. Often for immigrants and refugees, they have to start from scratch. They have to start from zero. Their work experience, their education from another country is valued less in the United States. And that needs to change. If we had a mentality of no matter where you were educated, no matter where you got your experience from, it's all valuable, I think would be a tremendous change in terms of how people started to think about skills.
So because you said that, I'll plug one more thing. It's verifiable credentials. And so having that infrastructure that allows us to take those transferable skills and actually help people narrate what they're good at and translate that to the skills and jobs here in the US.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I'll ask a question. This is Josh Winter. And given that it's Women's History Month, I wanted to ask our panelists, what learnings can you bring from other issues that you've worked on how you've been able to galvanize, or how we as a community have been able to galvanize support both from the public and private sectors on issues. For instance, I know Christina, JFF has a rich history of supporting and really advocating for reentry into the workforce of individuals who've been justice involved or formerly incarcerated. What lessons can we learn from that experience or other experiences that you all have had on how we can really bring forward opportunities for the immigrant and refugee population?
Yeah, I think it goes to policy, it goes to fair chance hiring. And I'll use that broadly. You mentioned those who've been in justice impacted, or those who just have been impacted by causes, work parents, for example, for flexibility, for leave, whether it's parental leave or leave to go take care of things that they need to, if they're in other situations, for flexible work arrangements, and for a culture that tolerates and supports that everyone deserves a second chance or deserves the opportunity to move from where they are to another, to advance. I think the other is around balance of family and responsibility and being really open. We talk a lot about the motherhood penalty or the justice penalty and making sure that it's not a penalty, that in fact, that it's something that employers are taking into consideration and building culture and support and policies around that.
A couple things I would highlight. I don't believe change happens unless one or more of these are true. Someone at the top believes in it and will fight for it to break the norms. The employees or staff believe in it and will be noisy if the company or firm doesn't make a change. The shareholders are noisy or care at it, and from a corporate perspective, it will have a positive impact on bottom line. And back to my storytelling point earlier, all of these things can be true when it comes to refugees and immigrants. And so figuring out within an organization, what is the one that's going to drive the change? In the case of Deloitte, it was a passionate person, and then all of the other things were able to be told and come along with it. So to me, those are key from a corporation perspective. And then the other thing is, how do you get unconscious bias out of a system? And so one of the things that we learned is we really leaned into our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our firm has been, I would say, at the cutting edge around women's initiatives and DE&I for a long time. We did a pilot where we looked at all of our new potential hires without names. And the differences were significant, simply because people don't recognize that they have biases. And when you're in a network-based organization where you hire for multiple projects, bias can exist. And so how do you find ways to take bias out of the system? So what's the business imperative? And then how do you break some of the potential cultural things that will prevent success, like conscious or unconscious bias? Talk about it, make change, and continue to assess and evolve. We have someone in our firm that leads DE&I, and we have a scorecard, we make it public, we hold ourselves accountable for it. And it was uncomfortable to publish our first DE&I report probably 4 years ago, simply because we weren't really proud. But what it did was it got the board talking about it, our employees talking about it, and leaders passionate about it.
Oh, that's incredible. Really amazing. Heather, Kristina, thank you so much for your time in this discussing all of this with us. It's been so fruitful. I want to also make sure we have time and space to speak with Kristina Dawkins, who is our director at Upwardly Global for Women's Economic Power, who is going to speak about one of our alumni.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Jina, and thank you for this opportunity to meet the board just one day after International Women's Day. I'm excited to be leading this new initiative where Women's Economic Power, we're supporting women on their journey to meaningful employment and thriving wage jobs. And so we're going to get to talk to someone about her journey, Anastasia, but before we do that, I'd like to introduce you all to her by showing a short video.
My name is Anastasia Sokolova, and I came here from Ukraine, from a tiny town called Izmail. I had a perfect life there. I had been working as a HR manager. The war started in February. To stay in Izmail when you have constant sirens, and so it was very difficult. I left Ukraine with my son. I wanted to stay in safe and peaceful place. I thought that I would have to start over my career, my education, my life here. When I first learned about the Upwardly Global, it gave me hope that everything would be fine, and this organization would definitely help me. There are a lot of differences between Ukrainian and the US job market, and Upwardly Global really helped me to understand those differences. And now I work as the technical recruiter at IT company. My first thought was, really? I can't believe, oh my God, I've got my first job here. Oh my God.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce Anastasia to join me in this conversation.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited and I'm very grateful for this opportunity to meet all of you. And I am excited. So yes, it's very cool that you invited me. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you here. So just to begin, would you share a little bit about your decision to leave Ukraine and come to the US?
Yes, I would love to share. So, the decision to leave Ukraine, my family, my friends, actually everything that I had there was the most difficult decision in my life. I love my country very much, and I had a great life in Ukraine, but some kind of realization that I have to protect my child came because, to stay in my city was scary and unsafe. And when you are in constant fear and under some stress and pressure, hearing constant sirens. Yes, it's true. When you see your child's tears, you begin to understand that you have to do something. You have to do something. You have to protect your son, your kid, yourself. And then I found out about the federal program Uniting for Ukraine, and actually I decided to try my luck. I asked for help the immigration attorney, and she helped me to find a sponsor, which was the main requirement under the terms of this program. And just few days later, we were talking to my future sponsor, Miss Mary Masterson. She is an amazing woman who wanted to help us, and we discussed everything. We liked each other. That was very important, I suppose, because when you don't know a person whom you are going to help, and in our case with whom we are going to live, so yeah, we liked each other, and just probably within a month, we arrived here to the US, to Long Island. And yes, now we live at the house of our sponsor. She's an amazing woman. She helps us a lot. And the most important thing, that we became friends, true friends, and even some small family, because yes, our relationship are just amazing.
That's great. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're able to find that beautiful connection with your sponsor. And you've also found work here. So can you share a bit about, did you face any challenges in finding a job opportunity, and how did Upwardly Global play a role in the career job you have now?
Yes, actually, after arriving here, that was one of the most important question for me, how to find a job, where can I find myself. But first of all, I needed to get work permit, employment authorization card, and the paperwork took something like about 2.5 months. And during the time, it's some kind of secret, I wanted to try to work illegally, something like to go to work as the waitress in the nearest pizzeria, because I knew that I had to start earning money. I had to provide myself and my son. But my sponsor, she dissuaded me from this idea. She supported and assured me that I have to wait. I have to wait for my documents, and also she assured me that I would be able to find a professional job. I have 2 master's degrees, and I have great experience of working as HR manager in Ukraine. And she told me that I have some kind of little advantage. I speak English, so it won't be very difficult. But again, I had really a lot of concerns. First of all, about my education, as you talked about. So I didn't know if my education is valuable here. I didn't know if my skills and experience would be useful, because again, we have, I can't say great differences between HR management in Ukraine and here in the US, but still laws, labor codes, a lot of stuff that I don't know. So yeah, that was like my biggest concern. And at that time, I found out about Upwardly Global. I thought, like, I have nothing to lose. I want to try, and I applied my documents. I applied for this assistant program. Fortunately, I was approved. I passed the English test, and we began to work with my job coaches. One of them was very nice lady by name Zarina, then Ariel, and I got great support. I got great help, assistance, new knowledges about how to build the US style resume, how to behavior at the interview, some knowledges about US job market, again, how to search for the job here. I've got access to different professional courses and trainings, and then accidentally I found my first job here. That was Monster Site. This is a small IT company, and now I work as a technical recruiter. I love my job. You can't imagine how happy I was when I got that offer. I was shocked that I'm hired. I was shocked that I would work exactly that field that I love. Now I'm still happy because again, I love my job. My colleagues are super cool people. They're very supportive, they're very friendly, they're very understanding, and they accepted me like a member of their family. And so that it is.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. I know we're all thrilled for you. I think just we can talk for hours, and I know we've already gotten to chat so much, but it's always good to talk to you. But my last question would be, now that we're a year into this horrible war, but you've made the decision to rebuild your life here in the States, what are your hopes for you and your family?
You're absolutely right. When I came here, I didn't know if I want to stay, if I want to stay here, if I'm able to start over my life, if I'm able to find myself. But just probably a couple of months ago, I really did my decision, made my decision. I want to stay here in spite of my great love to my country. I want to stay here because I want to give my son future. And unfortunately, in Ukraine, I suppose that nearest couple of years, probably 5, 10, I don't know, nobody knows. It would be very difficult. And you know that I'm single mom, and nobody except me can do that, give my son future. He likes to stay here. He does great job at his school. He has great progress in his English. He found friends. And my hope to realize myself and to give us future here. As for my family, I hope that we will see each other very soon.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, and we share that hope for you seeing your family as well. But so glad that you're finding a family and community here and are part of the Upglow family. So thank you. It's truly an honor to be part of your journey. Thank you for sharing with us. And I'm going to turn that back over to Tammy.
Thank you. I appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anastasia and Christina. It was wonderful to learn more about your story. I'd now like to introduce Matthew, who's from our Upwardly Global Leadership Council in Seattle, to share a few updates with us.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And thank you for such a fascinating discussion. And we've learned so much and continue to be inspired by everyone who's contributing to Upwardly Global's mission. I just wanted to share a few brief updates from the Seattle Leadership Council. We're one of the groups across the country that supports Upwardly Global in their local missions. 3 updates that I thought might be interesting. One is we recently hosted an in-person event for our local Seattle community, which is one of the rare opportunities we get to come together as job seekers, alumni, volunteers, employers, and the Leadership Council. And 2 things really struck us through that event. One was the importance of community and sharing experiences, particularly for job seekers who often feel quite alone and unique in their job search. It's a very isolating experience often. And I think they all appreciated hearing what's worked for others, but also the importance of persistence, positivity. And the community really has a role to play in pastoral care and support for job seekers on that journey. The second thing was, and Heather mentioned this earlier, that help doesn't stop with landing the first job. That's really the beginning of the journey in some sense. And being successful in that job, growing a career, adapting to the cultural changes, that's really an area where support is extremely helpful. The second thing I wanted to share was around some of the expertise we have within the leadership councils. We have senior recruiters and HR folks in some of the major tech companies, in particular here in Seattle. And we've been doing work with the Upwardly Global team and the San Francisco LC to capture best practices for job seekers in the tech industry and so document how to engage with recruiters, how to engage with hiring managers, how to position yourself, how the interview process works. And one of the things to Jina and Christina's point earlier is helping decode the job taxonomy of these big firms and help people translate the skills they have into these often confusing job titles, which are inconsistent between Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and others. So helping make sense of that is one of the purposes of that work we're doing. And the third thing was the importance of the Upwardly Global Mentorship Program, which launched recently. We have a number of our LC who have volunteered to be mentors, and it's a very structured curriculum. It's a very close mentoring relationship. There's certainly, I hope, value for the job seekers in that level of attention, getting access to our networks, getting advice on a 12-week program that and beyond that helps them on their journey, but also deeply entrenches the passions of the Leadership Council members, and is a really rewarding way for us to engage directly, which I know we all appreciate. So those are the readouts from the Seattle LC. Thanks for listening.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, for sharing all of that. I think a lot of really exciting work that's going on. I guess we're now almost at the end of the hour. On behalf of the board and the staff here at Upwardly Global, I really want to thank everyone for joining and really welcome all of you to kind of continue to stay involved and be part of our Upwardly Global community. Just a quick reminder to our board members to join the link for our private board meeting, which is following this one. Is there anything else, Jina, you wanted to add?
No, I'm just so thankful for this forum, the conversation, all the incredible people that are making an effort to help advance and include this community. So thank you.
Thank you all.